what is it that you're trying
to stand up for?
Well, to accomplish through your writing.
Well, you know, I'm against a society where, you know, the wealth is not shared. I'm against a society that ignores the homeless, that ignores poverty, that has to debate whether everyone gets health care. I mean, that's bizarre. Mm-hmm. That's absurdity. You know, we have enough wealth, not only in this country, but in the world, that we shouldn't have any poverty and famine. You shouldn't see people starving to death and babies starving to death in Somalia or other parts of Africa or in India, you know, or in Brazil. You know, it's insane. We're the most immature species on the planet that ever existed. We're in a time where we have all this technology, all this wealth, all these resources, but yet we're still fighting, you know, and creating war upon war upon war so that a handful of people can control everything. I mean, that's bizarre. That's insanity. And we keep repeating it. Yes, it's insane.
I was going to ask you what you thought was the primary
like,
social justice issue facing
security.
But I think you just hit it. You know, race appears to be.
Let's get back to that question.
Well, I mean, okay, race. If I hear you correctly, is a part of it.
Social justice. What's the most social justice issue?
What's the most
in this country?
The thing that strikes you as the number one. If you had to narrow it down, because people talk about.
Well, I just can't pick one. It has to be a two-part thing. You know, one has to do with foreign policy, right? The other, domestic, of course, because that's what America's about: foreign policy, domestic policy, right? Now, foreign policy-wise, geez, in the last what? 10, 15 years or so? How many wars have the U.S. government launched or created or instigated? You know, well, this whole notion of George Bush Sr.'s New World Order?
How created?
Well, manufactured. Let's take Iraq, for instance, right? The idea around the invasion of Iraq was that, A, they had something to do, well, this is what they put out in the media so that everybody could get confused. They had something to do with the bombing, the September 11, 2001 bombing of the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, right? Mm-hmm. That the Iraqis had something to do with that. That was proven to be absurd and a lie. Then they said, well, they have weapons of mass destruction and we need, you know, we need a preemptive strike. You know what a preemptive strike is? That's like in that film Minority Report, based on the Philip K. Dick short story, where you're thinking, I think that you're thinking about committing a crime, so I'm going to arrest your ass.
Right. But they
preemptive.
But they did find some weapons. They're like 2 guns.
Yeah, 2 guns and a 40 ounce of beer.
They had that.
But the thing is
that's why they went to Afghanistan too.
But let's not forget that they manufactured it. That Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, all these people in Bush, W. Bush's cabinet forced the CIA to come up or make up some type of data. The head of the CIA at the time was like, well, they don't have anything. We checked. They don't have anything. They said, not good enough. Go back. So they came with this bogus data. They handed it over to Condi Rice and to Colin Powell, and they had them sell it to the American people. Colin Powell, being the good general, the good soldier, following orders, did a great job. Why? Because people admired somebody like Colin Powell. Why do you think he only lasted for 1 term? He stepped down because he was battling with the people on the inside. Mm-hmm. Cheney came out with a book just recently chastising him and lying about him and Condi Rice and the head of the CIA.
If you could, well, I think you already have, but if you could write an open letter to Colin Powell, to Condoleezza Rice,
I'm upset with them.
What would you say?
I'm upset with them because they knew what was going on and they just kept pushing it. You don't just leave office and a whole entire country, a sovereign nation, is totally wiped out and destroyed. Their economy is shattered, and you have millions of people dead, women and children, innocent folks, and then American soldiers' lives wasted, and all the families that have been shattered because of that, and the injuries and all that stuff. and then come back and say, oh yeah, you know, we were trying to do something, but no, you go to the press, you do anything in your power to stop that mess.
But you know, they would,
if you truly care about people and humanity.
You know, they would argue that they were toppling a dictator, just like they would argue they're doing the same thing in Libya now.
Well,
Gaddafi.
what's the history of the U.S. government? What's the history of this country? You take land from folks, you know, called Indians, and you want to work that land. You want that land to be prosperous, so you go into another a continent, and you take human beings there to work that and build your economy, right? And then you have all these wars to justify everything, and everybody becomes your enemy, but you're not the enemy of anyone? I mean, that's absurd. The U.S. With its imperialistic forces, its colonial forces, have always been oppressing people. I mean, look how long it took them to go into Nazi Germany.
What do you think? I'm thinking about Gil Scott-Heron, who wrote...
You're just jumping from...
Hey, because, you know, you reminded me of something. Because I'm thinking about what could make it better. Because
what can make it better?
Yeah, you've raised a lot of issues about...
The only thing that can make it better is the people. If the people put up with it, then it's going to be this way. If the people decide, hey, we ain't playing this game anymore, we're not allowing you to dupe us anymore, we're not participating in this anymore. Now we have a little bit of that with this economic crisis that we're in.
Yeah, but do you really see that happening, man? I mean, because
we do get a little bit of that when we had the stuff that took place in the Midwest, particularly in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes.
But you know...
When you talk about people of color rising up...
It's not just people of color. It's got to be all people.
But even in terms of one confluence of oppressed people coming together and rising up, do you see that happening? Because I've been looking.
Well, okay, let's just look at the recent situations in the Middle East and Africa. Let's look at what happened in Syria, Egypt, Libya, right? Now, I wouldn't call those things revolution because they weren't manufactured directly from the people. They were instigated by the CIA through social media, you know, the social network sites and all that stuff, Facebook, all that stuff. But there were conditions already in those countries, you know, repressive conditions that allowed it to happen and take place.
Okay, those are mighty strong words. How do you know the CIA was engaged in that kind of mischief in Facebook?
Because the CIA has its hands all up in Facebook and all these other social media. I mean, it's a known fact. It's a known thing. And many people have reported about the CIA's involvement in the situations that have been taking place in the Middle East. I mean, look, this is if you understand the New World Order, right, that Bush Sr. put out, then, you know, this was in the early 90s, you know, late 80s, early 90s. That was to say that we're going to have the Middle East and all these other third world countries that have always been problem spots. We're going to have them under our control. And it's not just the U.S. control, the Western forces, you know what I mean, the Western power structures, England, France, the U.S., right? We're going to have them under control. They tried to do that through military means. They have done it in part, but you can't be everywhere with a military. That's just too costly and too difficult, right? So what's a more efficient way, right? If you instigate within the country and you have it come from within. The U.S. has always been supporting counter-revolutions in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, you know, all of these places.
But how do you unfriend the CIA on Facebook, man?
I just think that we need the information. We need the information. People need the information, and it's getting cloudier and cloudier. You do have all these avenues to get information out, but even that can be so corrupted and clouded, you know. It's just hard to get everybody on the same politically conscious and aware page. But I think that the conditions will create the animosity and the anger that will naturally create a groundswell. The economic conditions in this country and what's happening in other countries.
We will see. We will see.